I invited this woman to open for me in England. And I met her at a reading, and she said, I'm a writer too, and I do what you do. And so I'm doing a show tomorrow night in Nottingham, you can have 5 minutes, And then she called the tour manager and said, I'm going to need a lot more than 5 minutes. And he said, no, 5 minutes. And she said, how would I know when my 5 minutes are up? Wear a watch. I mean, it's not that hard.
Oh my God. So your breakout was Santaland Diaries, where I'm sure the people who listen to this show would know, where you played an elf at Macy's. And then you wrote about it, and then it was on public radio, and you were a breakout literary star from that. And that was in '89 when you were doing the job.
No, I was an elf in 1990 and 1991.
Oh, okay.
And then it was on the radio in 1992.
In 92. So in between the period of time of like 90, 91, 92, before it was breakout success, how did you feel? Did you feel hopeful about your literary prospects?
I never confused writing and publishing.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I know people who do, but I never did. And I just worked every day. And someone told me that if you work every day, when the time is right, somebody will come a knocking. That's Knockin, will come a knocking.
Yeah, come a knocking.
And I just believed it, and it's what happened.
That is fascinating.
But I mean, I know some people now at my age who it didn't work out for, the way that they hoped. And a lot of them are pretty bitter. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, would I be really bitter if it hadn't worked out? If things hadn't worked out for me, or would I be, happy for everybody?
It's funny because on Instagram, I crowdsource. I go, we have our dream guest today, David Sedaris. What would be the question you have about process? And one of the questions that I thought was an interesting question from Instagram was people were asking, what do you do when you're stuck at the 2/3 mark of something? And that hit me. I was like, I know what you mean. The 2/3 mark is hard.
Right. Sometimes you just go back 2 pages and then take a different path.
Oh.
I mean, that often works for me.
Yeah.
And you can sometimes spot that moment where you made a choice that led you to the dead end. So just go back to that. And it helps to throw it away. So you can't, because sometimes you'll think, oh, it had that line, and that line was so funny. And then when you try to incorporate that line, you're just building everything around a laugh when you can just go find another laugh.
Right.
I talked to someone the other day, and it's a very accomplished, celebrated novelist, and he just threw a book away.
Oh.
He threw hundreds of pages away.
Wow.
And threw it away. Like, didn't just keep a file that he can, just threw it away. And I thought, wow, that would be really good for people to know that.
Yeah.
Because most people would think, okay, I'll throw away 10 pages, or I'll throw away, but not throw away hundreds of pages. But it happens all the time. And I always figured it happened all the time. And I always figured, you throw stuff away. Stuff doesn't work. I don't know. I just went on this tour. I had 8 new essays. One of them didn't work. I stepped on a toad one night, and I just felt so bad for the longest time. And then it led from that to me, investigating toads.
Yeah.
They can live up to 10 years in captivity.
Oh, wow.
And then going to this barber that I go to in Sussex, who's from, I think, Uzbekistan. And his English isn't very good at all. And like sometimes there are people and you realize you're causing them pain by trying to have a conversation with them.
Yes.
And it was that sort of situation, me trying to explain to him that a toad can live up to 10 years. And it just didn't work.
And it was an essay and you threw it away, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How do you decide when you throw it away? Is it because you were reading it on stage in your live tours and it just wasn't getting the response you wanted?
When you read it out loud and then you're just filled with shame afterwards. Like if you read it out loud and you think,
You're just filled with shame afterwards.
when you read it out loud and you think, oh, I can fix this and that. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you read it out loud and then you just like I always think of a cat with a litter box, like covering it up. That's what I think. Let's just read something funny now that's guaranteed to get a laugh and just cover that turd up.
So we were both invited to Vatican City to meet Pope Francis, which was a little bit misleading in the sense that we didn't really, we shook his hand.
Right.
We didn't talk with him. I think we all kind of thought, Stephen Colbert was here a couple weeks ago talking to me, and I think he also felt like we were going to speak with the Pope. We didn't. Did you feel like we were going to speak with the Pope?
I thought there'd be a group of maybe 8 people, and we'd sit around and rap with the Pope. I thought that he would have questions for us.
Yes.
And it would be an intimate setting, and maybe he'd have a cup of coffee in his hand, and we'd have a cup of coffee in our hand, and he'd say, "Can I top you off?" I thought it was going to be that kind of situation.
I thought so too. I think we all, I don't know if we were misled or we just immediately made it about ourselves. Of course, we'll have an intimate audience with the Pope. And then it was just in it was 100 of us in a room, and he spoke. And I actually thought his speech was pretty good. We had a printout of it in English. It was in Italian. But it was about, laughter's contagious, and people are so divided right now, and humor has the power to bring us together. I thought it was pretty good.
I thought it wasn't good enough. And I thought, I don't know if he wrote it or if somebody else wrote it, but it wasn't good enough. His delivery was bad. He was lifeless. He got one little mini laugh by sticking a thumb in his ear and waving his fingers, but it was a pity laugh.
Yeah.
And I just thought if I were going to gather people together, I'd put a little more work into it. I did. How
dare you, David Sedaris? How dare you defame Pope Francis, my Pope of my church?
That's what I felt. And it was interesting to meet him, but I didn't feel anything.
Right.
But again, I didn't petition to be invited. They gave us each a rosary.
Yeah.
And I gave it to my dry cleaner's mother.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to give it to the most Catholic person around.
Smart.
And so I gave it to her because I thought, and I'd never met her mother, but I just know that her mother's
it would be meaningful
very
to her.
Catholic. And so I thought it'd be worth it. You get the rosary and
I feel the
give
same
it to
way.
the right
I give it to
person.
my parents. They were thrilled. The rosary is probably the best
What was
takeaway.
interesting to me about that day was that there were 100 writers and comics, and you knew every single person in that room was going to work it into a bit. And so,
yes.
and so everyone's...
That never happens.
Yeah. And so I thought, what would my take be?
Yeah.
And so I just focused on the close.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't read other people's or seen their thing, but I would imagine that could be my own take on it, because everyone's bringing their eye into it and everyone's going to see it in a different way. But I thought to myself, what am I moved by? What am I awed by?
Yeah.
And it was the clothing.
You like the outfits, yeah. And then you went, so you went and you wrote about this in the New Yorker in a fantastic piece. You went with Julia Louis-Dreyfus and some other folks to shop for what ended up being, I believe, a Cossack?
Yeah.
Like a priest's
It's a priest
habit.
robe.
Yeah, priest robe.
And there's the pleating in the back is really beautiful. I mean, I'm sure there are lesser priest robes, but the place that we went to has been making robes for the priest for like 300 years. I mean, for the Pope and his associates for.
Wow.
And I was afraid they wouldn't sell it to a layman.
Right.
And I didn't want to lie. I mean, my last name's Greek, so when they asked, for my name for the receipt, then they would. I didn't want to lie, but I lied a little. And I said I collected religious garments from around the world. And then it takes 9 months to have one made, and usually 3 fittings. And I thought, well, okay, I'll come back. But they had one that was already made. And so I bought that one.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it looks nice.
Oh, it's really slimming.
At one point you told me you might wear it on tour.
I did wear it. Yeah, I wore it on stage a number of times. But sometimes, you know how it is, you get to a theater and every theater's different. And you realize they're not LED lights and they're really hot. And
Yeah.
you burning up. So I was going to step out of it, but it's really hard to undo 33 buttons in a way that people don't notice. You're supposed to, it has 33 buttons, one for every year of Christ's life. And you're supposed to reflect on Christ's life every time you put it on and off. I'll tell you, the second time you put it on, you're pulling it on over your head. And I think and you're wishing Jesus had been crucified at 8.
That's crazy. Did you go to church when you were a kid? You went to church when you were a kid.
Greek Orthodox Church.
Greek Orthodox, yeah. Do you ever go? Do you still go?
We go at Christmas, but we stay for 15 minutes.
Mm.
And just to see what people are wearing, just to get dressed up, just to go there, see what people are wearing, and leave.
See what people are wearing. Yeah. We had a comedian on the show, very, very popular comedian, Bert Kreischer, and you may have crossed paths with this guy before, but he's very, it's hard to describe. He's very broad, like in the bro universe of comedians. And he's very funny. He's a very good comedian. But he said that that's a photo of him right there. He wears no shirt a lot of times.
Oh, really?
And he's a huge fan of yours. And he said, David Sedaris, in the 1990s when I first came to New York, I asked someone for a book recommendation. What book are you reading? I'm reading David Sedaris' book. He picked up one of your books. Loved it. Loved every second of it. And it was his introduction to having a gay friend, which was you.
Huh.
Though you never met him, that was the impact your book had on him.
I'm always confused by that with comedians. Like,
which thing?
Like not getting dressed up.
You mean Bert with no shirt?
Yeah. Put a shirt on.
Put a shirt on. No, but it's part of what he does. It's part of what he does. It's somehow fits with all of his stories that he would be very quick to take his shirt off.
Did he have his shirt off when he was being interviewed?
No, not that day. But I think if I had asked him to, I think he would have taken his shirt off. Maybe he did. Oh yeah, when we took photographs, he did take his shirt off. Yeah.
Could you ever do anything on stage naked?
Would I do anything naked on stage? I don't suppose. I think...
I mean, if you went on stage naked, I mean, people would get used to it within a few minutes, I suppose, but it would just change everything.
Well, it's a whole thing, naked comedy. Some people do a lot of stand-up comedy fully naked. Like, it's a whole genre of comedy.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's a whole thing. There's a comedian, very funny comedian named Mike Kaplan who does it. And I've never gone to one of these shows, but it's a whole culture of people who do naked comedy.
I met someone the other day, and he got a part in a movie, and he had lines.
Yeah.
So he thought, great. And the movie, and there was
So he thought, great.
And there was an actor in the movie who's a very highly regarded actor. So it wasn't, it wasn't just a student project or anything.
Yeah.
And he had to suck the guy's dick. And the guy had a prosthetic dick that this guy sucked. And he said it was just like a real one. But he had to show his real dick. And he said it's nothing to look at. And he had to show his own ass and his own dick. And then suck a fake dick in the movie. And then call his mother and say, well, don't ever watch this movie. And then they cut his lines. They cut his lines.
I'm sorry, but that story is so funny. That story is too funny. Because you have to read into it and go, did they give him the lines knowing that it would lure him into doing the role and then take the lines away? So in that story, you're saying he had to show his own dick or the other actor did?
No, he had to show his own. The other actor had a prosthetic.
Oh, okay.
So that.
Oh, my God.
And I guess that would be the thing. If you were like a big actor, you would say, well, it's not my real dick.
Right.
But there's not a prosthetic that would make your dick smaller.
That was the big thing. That was a big discussion point on Dirk Diggler on Boogie Nights, was that it was a prosthetic dick.
Right.
And not Mark Wahlberg's thing.
But for some reason that works, because then you think, well, it wasn't his dick.
Right.
But then it's still your balls and everything around it.
Maybe, but I think it's the whole. Of course, we're just talking earlier about how comedically neither of us talk a lot about sex, and then we're talking about it like a graphic sex scene.
I know, but we're not talking about our own.
We're not talking about our own.
Yeah,
true. I was thinking about, we got a lot of questions from when we crowdsourced this on Instagram of sort of how much of what you say is true. And I always quote you, and the first time you were on the podcast, I quoted this too, which is true enough for you. You said people ask you how are your stories true, and you've said true enough for you, which I think is the greatest answer.
Well, I mean, when you write for the New Yorker, I mean, when I wrote about going to see the Pope, they fact check everything. They contacted the private chef from the dinner we had the night before.
Oh,
we
did
met
they
the Pope,
really?
and I had written
Wow.
that it was an 8-course meal, and the fact checker said, I contacted the chef. I mean, how did he even find her? She said it was 7 courses. I said, yes, but there was a bonus, cacio e pepe. Remember that?
Sure, yeah.
So it was 8. Well, you need to make that clear in the essay. So I just got rid of it because what it does, it just ties a knot in your essay.
Interesting.
It's something that's not really that important.
Right.
And then you're adding, although for those who wanted it, and 5 of the 12 people wanted it, there was cacio e pepe, which she said we could. It just snags people unnecessarily. And I would be surprised if they hadn't talked to the Pope in that essay. And then I had something in the New Yorker a few weeks ago, and I was in Maine, and this man stopped me. I was on an island in Maine, and this man stopped and asked what my favorite color was. And I don't know that I have one, but I said red, and he reached into a bag next to him and handed me a flashlight, a tomato-colored flashlight, the size. And I wrote that it was the size of my penis when I was 12. And I just put that to fuck with the fact checker. So the fact checker would say, how do we know how big your penis was when you were 12? Google it.
Oh, my God.
But that drives me crazy when people say how much of it is. Because, again, when you write for the New Yorker, everything. If I wrote about this, and if I said that your coffee cup was red, they would ask you, is the coffee cup red? And then if you said, well, it was kind of on the orange side, then that would be a problem.
Yeah.
It's everything. And there are people then who say, well, you shouldn't be allowed to write about anything that happens when you're alone because it can't be fact-checked.
I've never heard
and I would
that
think
before.
it would be
That's
different
outrageous.
if I were writing a political essay.
Sure.
Where I was writing an essay that had real consequences for another person, but I'm writing humor. And so sometimes I have to really fight with them to say, look, I'm trying to get a laugh here.
Yeah.
And I'm still well, like one time I said I was with my brother-in-law at Costco like 15 years ago. And I always have little gifts to give teenagers at my book signings. So I was giving away condoms that year, right? Because they're light and easy to pack, and you could just have a laugh and give a kid a condom.
Sure.
And I was at Costco with my brother-in-law on a Sunday morning, and all we had in our cart was a box of condoms. Mm-hmm. And I said it was the size of a cinder block, and I said it made us look so gay. And I said we got to get something else in this cart. And he put strawberries in there, which just made us look gayer. And then the New Yorker fact checker said the largest box of condoms that Costco sells is like 16, so that wouldn't be the size of a cinder block. And I said, when you're in a small town, conservative town in North Carolina on a Sunday morning with another man, and you just have one thing in your grocery cart, and it's condoms, it feels as big as a cinder. Like, you gotta give this to me. If I was writing about the number of condoms that Costco sells, then that would be important, you know.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. So sometimes it's a struggle, like.
And also, where's the lost art of embellishment? Where's
Lost.
Yeah, exactly. It's lost.
It's completely lost. On stage you can do it, but on the page you can't.
Well, it's the old adage about Irish storytelling, which is the more times you tell it, the better it is. The more farther it is from true.
Right.
And it's like, shouldn't we honor that in some way?
No, in the age of gotcha, then that's, but again, when I started, you could embellish.
Right.
And there was like a long tradition of that. And then that was just taken away.
It's interesting because the Hassan Minhaj article was in the New Yorker. Did you read that?
No.
Okay. So about a year ago, the New Yorker did like a long
I know what you're talking
expose
about. Yeah.
about comedian Hassan Minhaj, who's a friend of mine, and they basically fact-checked his comedy specials. It was very strange because in some ways I could see why certain elements of it you'd say, hey, can we talk about this because this is actually a historical investigation by the FBI and we'd like to, discuss that. But certain things were like, the girl who blew me off in high school, they called her and she said she didn't say the thing that is in his special. And if you go back in the history of autobiographical storytelling, I mean, swimming to Cambodia can't be word for word true, right? I mean, Spalding Gray's stuff can't be word for word. I mean, like, the idea of that we're going to do that now is bizarre. I actually think it fundamentally changes autobiographical storytelling.
On the page, at least, it does.
But even with Hassan, it does, because they're fact-checking something that's a comedy special.
But I don't know. I just feel like people went overboard with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was after James Fry's.
Yeah, A Million Little Pieces.
Yeah.
The fact-checking of that.
It was after that then everybody just kind of went overboard with it. And I don't know. I've never... I think it would be so hard to have something in your past like that you're just waiting for it to come to light.
Yeah.
That's what hired killers are for.
That's what hired killers are for.
But they always come back and blackmail you, always.
Last time we spoke, we talked about how you pick up garbage in England on the road. That's a job you either assigned yourself or...
That's my hobby.
It's your hobby. Have you picked up any interesting trash recently?
It's the same stuff over and over.
I
mean, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, like 7-Eleven is like a litter supply store.
Yeah.
You never find anything that real food came in.
Oh, yeah?
Like a bag that nuts came in.
Right.
It's all, I think it should be legal to drive drunk because so many people throw cans and bottles out the window because they're drunk, and if they get stopped, it's going to be worse if they have it in the car.
Yeah.
So just make it legal to drive drunk, and then they wouldn't be throwing the cans and bottles out the window.
I've heard this theory too, which is I've never been to Japan. I've always wanted to go. But I think you have to carry your trash. Like, there's no trash receptacles.
There are no trash cans in Tokyo.
Right. And so I've heard that it really makes you rethink consumption and trash.
But at the same time, you would never walk down the street eating. Like, there are places that have ice cream.
Yeah.
But there's a little place where you stand and eat it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't walk down the street eating an ice cream cone. You would never walk down the street with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You wouldn't... unless you were taking it to your office or something.
When you went to Japan, you probably have a lot of Japanese fans, right?
When I went to Japan, the first time, my Japanese publisher, this is so embarrassing. I had never been to Japan before, and I heard you were supposed to have gifts for people. So I had gifts. I was going from Paris, and they didn't sell... at the time, they didn't sell these macaroons everywhere. They sell them everywhere now. I have a block against the name of the store that sells them, but it's a very famous store in Paris. And anyway, so I brought 3 boxes of them to Tokyo, and it turned out to be 4 people, right? And so I just kept, and they didn't have anything for me.
Right.
So I thought, okay, and Hugh said, give them their gifts. And I was like, Hugh, shut up. Give them their gifts. And then I said, okay, look, I thought there were only going to be 3 of you. I thought there were only going to be 3 of you, so I only have 3 gifts. So I'm going to write each of your names on a slip of paper. And then you each...
This is ridiculous.
I know it. And people would kill themselves for less. I was so embarrassed. And so the 3 men got gifts and the woman didn't. And then, this is insane. Later that day, we ran into the woman. You never run into anyone in Tokyo. We were on subways. We ran into her, and she opened her bag to get something, and I saw the box of macaroons in her bag. So one of the guys had given it to her.
There's some corruption.
But when I first went to Tokyo, my publisher took me to a sumo match. Mm-hmm. And got box seats at a sumo match.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, but the box is a square drawn on the ground.
Okay.
Like it's not, it's so crazy.
It's not a physical box.
And you have a little picnic in this square drawn on the ground. And then they took me to a kabuki. And
Did you meet the sumo wrestlers?
No.
Okay.
And the kabuki was like 6 hours long. And I thought, how do I get out of this? 6 hours. And there was that intermission where you eat dinner. It was riveting. Loved every moment of it. But my book sold like 25 copies in Japan.
Oh, is that right?
But it didn't matter. They treated me like a king. And I went back the next time and it was the same thing. And then I just stopped contacting because I was so embarrassed they were spending so much money on me.
What occurred to me when we were in Vatican City is, we met the Pope and then you went Cossack shopping. And with all your stories, you pick up trash. Obviously, Santaland Diaries is based on a unique life experience. You clearly go into the stories. You seek out life.
No, I don't really.
Having a story.
No, I don't really. No,
really?
I don't. No, like I've never. If I thought, what if I took the subway to the end of the platform and slept on the station? Like, no, I've never. I did one gimmicky thing once when I went to a nudist colony. Okay. And that was years ago. And it didn't, and I wrote about it, but it didn't work because I couldn't be honest about why I went.
Oh, interesting.
Right? I had to make it seem like, I always wondered what it was like, and I don't even walk around the house barefoot. Don't I mean? Like, the only reason I did it is my editor, it was my second book, and he said, what's it going to be about? And I said, I'll go to a nudist colony, because I'd never read anything about one. And then I thought, maybe he'll forget. And then it was actually him who found the place and made the reservation for me to go to. And but when I was writing about it, it would have been so much better if I had said that.
Right. Yes.
If I said I would do it, and then I'd try to get out of it, and then I had to go. That would have changed everything. But it was just false to say, this is in 1995 or something. It was just so false to say, what would it be like? But no, I don't do things to write about them. That's why I'm so glad when something happens, and when I got the invitation to go and meet the Pope, I didn't call the New Yorker and say, can I write about it? Because that's the worst when you have you have to
have
write
a story.
something.
Yeah.
And when you're because I don't ever want it to be forced like that. What made it hard to write about was the people who we went with.
Colbert and
Chris Rock and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And then how do you do that and not sound like a name dropper?
That's true.
And
my joke is I was the last to be invited. I was at the bottom of the list. They called me in May to go in June. I think there was an April list.
I got called 2 days before you went.
You beat me?
Yeah.
You got called 2 days before.
2 days beforehand.
Wow.
I got the invitation.
That's
so yeah, I was pretty sure I was the last, but
it was a little disorganized.
But I'm not in a room with people like that. I don't. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
That's not my everyday experience.
Right.
And also, you didn't want to talk about. I don't know. Like I didn't want to talk about, Chris Rock was sitting not far away, and I heard him talking about things, and I wasn't going to quote him because the fact checker, was
Right.
going to contact. I don't know how they contact him, but they're
Right.
going to contact, and you then no one's going to trust you if you're overhearing their conversations and you're writing, then
By the way, this is the funniest. No one's going to fact check this because it's just us, but it's walking down the hallway with Chris Rock and gorgeous artifacts all around us and architecture. He looks up and he goes, well, it wasn't a union job. Someone at Mish Spirit says, fuck, marry, kill, your greatest works.
fuck, marry, what?
Fuck, marry, kill is a game.
Oh, fuck, marry, kill.
Yeah.
Oh,
What
okay.
would you fuck? What would you marry? What would you kill? And it's of your own works, whether it's your essays, your books, etc.
Oh, and what would I fuck? That means what do I approve of? What do I like?
I think so, yeah. What would you be most passionate about or turns you on still?
I mean, in my own work?
Yes.
Like an essay that I wrote that I think,
Yeah.
okay. I wrote an essay about my friend Dawn that was in the New Yorker a couple of years ago called Good Year. I would fuck that. And Mary?
Mary's like who you're comfortable maybe spending your life with. So it's like what's the essay or book that you'd be comfortable spending your life with?
Oh, well, can you fuck and marry the same person? The same thing?
I mean, for the sake of the game, I don't think so. I think you
Okay.
have to pick a fucker and a marry that are different.
Okay. I would marry an essay I wrote about going with my sisters to Japan and going shopping with them in Japan.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
And what would I kill? I would kill the entire book naked.
No!
Yeah.
Get out of my house!
Kill the entire book.
Get out of my house!
No,
You're talking
it
about
was
like a
written-
seminal work of literature that I
No,
love.
Ugh, no. Ugh. The problem is that I wasn't going on tour then. And so if I'd read those essays out loud, I'd be a third as long as they are.
You're out of your mind.
But I had to turn a book in, and I was at a writer's colony, and everybody else was writing. I mean, I was write every day anyway, but I thought I was just going by the word count, and everything in that book is too long, and it's trying too hard.
It's
trying
unbelievable
too
that you
hard.
think that. Because it's a seminal book. It's like that has the essay about you coming out.
Yeah, it's awful. That book was, if you met someone at a party,
Yeah.
and they didn't know who you were, and you were trying to tell them who you were.
Yeah.
You would pick the big things that happened in your life.
Right.
Right. And so now I think it's more about making something out of nothing, which is much harder to do, and I think makes for a better essay.
Yeah.
So it always bothers me when people can't see that anything I wrote in the last year is better than anything I wrote before.
Right. No, I certainly can see that. I mean, what do you think? In what way specifically do you feel like you get better as a writer? Specifically, with
I think I get better at not trying too hard or not to look like you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
Like trusting the audience.
Yeah.
Trusting that they're listening.
Yeah.
Because beforehand, it would be like if I didn't get a laugh, every 15 seconds,
Yeah.
they weren't listening. And now I know you can feel them listening.
Yeah.
And you can feel when they stop listening.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, before it was like that person jabbing you in the ribs, which
Yeah.
is just kind of irritating. And so now I'm not going to get up there without laughs.
Right.
And
That's such a great analogy, though, of the ribs because there is something about your writing now that is so effortless. It just feels like you're relaying a story, and it doesn't feel like you're forcing an emotion on us.
Well, plus has been written 19 times, and then read out loud, and then, there was a applause I was getting in this tour for something. It just didn't feel right. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? So I just got rid of it.
Right.
Because, I mean, it was laughs and applause, its own separate applause, but then it just felt like, I didn't like the feel. I didn't like the sound.
I have
of
that
it.
with, there's a couple of jokes I have in my current tour that I'm doing where it goes to applause. And I always say to the audience, well, no, we don't want it to be a rally. You know,
Right.
It is a precautionary thing is when people are clapping more than laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that's interesting though that you disavow Naked, which is one of, I think, our great works of comedy literature of all time. Because people, I guarantee you, and I'm sure people have said this to you, people probably came out because of that book. People probably became, were more comfortable with who they were because of that book. No one said that to you?
Oh, yeah, but I just think like, gee. I don't know. Like, I mean, most people, most writers, I think, feel that way. Like it's hard to look back at something they wrote a long time ago.
No, I get that. Yeah. Is there anything you regret from your writing?
I mean, I regret hurting anybody. Anybody who I hurt. There was this girl I went to high school with who was hurt by something. I changed her name. It didn't occur to me, I mean, when you're young and it's your first book, you don't really think anyone's really going to read it,
Yes.
I mean, you just don't think that.
No, you're absolutely right.
And I changed her name, and she was hurt by it, and I regret that.
Interesting. Because it's funny, because like whenever people ask me, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, we got a lot of people asking this question over Instagram today, is people always ask me, how do you write about people? Exactly the thing you're saying. How do you write about real people? I always fudge details to throw people off of who the actual person is. But you're saying, like with the New Yorker, they would fact check that and they'd go, no, you can't write this.
Well, I wrote something, and it was just really a throwaway line. It was an essay. I went to Africa in February. And I'd been at a party earlier, and I said I'd met an author I've long admired. And I said, oh, you look so young. And she said, I had a facelift. She said, I had my neck done too.
Yeah.
And then I moved into the essay after that. So the fact checker's like, who was it? And I said, why do I have to say who it was, right?
Yeah.
So then I told them, and then they contacted her. And she's perfectly cool. She didn't care who knows it. But then I was just so mad at the fact checker. Like, I didn't even name her.
Yeah.
Why do you have to go?
Oh, I hate
And then
this.
I was afraid that she would think that then I was going to like, and I wouldn't.
That it would be
if
a
she
hit
had
piece
said,
or something
if she
like
had
that.
said like, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
But I had a face like, she was so open about it.
Yeah.
And again, but if you change someone's name, you have to acknowledge it. You have to say, this guy, let's call him Mike.
Yeah,
or
sure.
I'll call him Mike.
Yeah.
That you have to do that. But usually if I'm writing about people, I try to write about funny people.
Yeah.
And I repeat funny things that they said.
Yes.
And it's not like they're writers themselves.
Yeah.
Or they have and they were like, I was going to use that line.
Yeah.
It's not like that. I think I make people look good. And in terms of writing about my family, it's usually stuff they know is funny.
Yeah.
Like it's not. So when there's a laugh, you're not laughing at them. That's their laugh.
Yes.
But it's funny to me that people think that it's not. Like, how do you not know?
Yeah.
Like the stuff between the quotation marks is what you're laughing at.
No, I know.
So why you think you're laughing? Do you think that person doesn't know they're funny?
I have a thing I've been saying on stage lately. It's a true story. It's my daughter and she gets the laugh. I tell the story, which is I'm walking down the street with my daughter and someone says to me, I like your comedy. I go, thanks. And they look at my daughter. I go, your dad's a great comedian. And my daughter just goes, all right. And we walk a few blocks and I go, Oona, what do you think when people say stuff like that? And she goes, it's a waste of my time. I go, that's the meanest thing anyone's ever said to me. And I know Bill Burr.
That's nice.
I do it because she gets the laugh, and I've like told her the joke, and
Right.
she likes it because she gets the laugh.
Right. So to me, that's making your daughter look
She's funny.
good.
Yeah.
But you're making her look good.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess I'm just sort of surprised. It's like a portrait that I'm painting, but it's a flattering portrait. Like I'm not taking your picture when you're passed out at a party with your mouth open. That's not the picture that I'm... that's the picture I'm giving you of me.
Yeah.
But not the picture... my boyfriend, so he just had a hip replaced, right? And he said the day before he had his hip replaced, he said, I was just on the phone with my older brother, and he says he wished he was here to help out. I said, call him back. And he said, no, he didn't mean it. I said, call him back. 3 hours later, I had a car going to his brother's house 2 hours north of Seattle, picking him up.
This is hilarious.
Flew him business class to New York, had a car meet him there, brought him to the house, right? So he could, help take care of Hugh. Well, and then Hugh's sister texted him and said, is David any help? And I took the phone and I wrote, he's no help whatsoever. And she wrote back and she said, that really makes me angry. But then he's so self-involved. And I and what I had done wasn't fair, to use his phone to write back. Because she would have never said that to my face. But I was talking to Amy, and Amy said, that's your own fault. You've written about yourself in such a way that you're the lazy person. You're the one who doesn't do anything. And that's your reputation. Right. And there's nothing you can do to get out of it.
Yeah.
It's like if your reputation is the school whore. You can't change it.
Right.
You can become a nun, and it doesn't change it.
Right.
So I thought, well, okay, it's my own fault that his family... But I started seeing myself through his family's eye.
Yes.
But then at the same time, I bought his mother an apartment in Paris.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so the stuff when I'm self-involved, sitting in a room writing about myself, like everyone's benefiting, right?
So what we do in every show is working it out for a cause. If there's a nonprofit that you think does a good job, we just link to them in the show notes, and I usually contribute. Is there anyone you can think of?
All right. I've been thinking about this lately.
Okay.
I am sick to death of donating money to charity.
Fair.
And they spend every second trying to get you to give them more.
It's my whole life.
Right? Like last year, someone I knew had cancer, so I donated to the American Cancer Society.
Yeah.
Right? We loved your last essay in the New Yorker. Let's get together and talk about, and everyone I've ever given money to does that. And it's so irritating.
Yeah.
Right?
I get it.
So I give money. Here's who I give money to.
Okay.
Somebody going through a trash can for food.
Okay.
Somebody mentally ill
Okay.
on the street because they don't come back to you.
Okay.
And they don't say, can you make it $100 the next time? Or they don't say, can we get this? Can we do this in your will? Now, outsourcing is a nice thing because I wrote something a couple of years ago. I was on book tour. And this woman who was my media escort, who's the person who drives you to your appointments and stuff, she said, at church this morning, our pastor gave everyone $50 and told us to give it to a person in need by 3 o'clock or 3:10. And that 3:10 was corresponded to a Bible verse. Right? And she said, I'm not going to be around any poor people between now and then. I have a luncheon at the country club. She said, can I give you this $50 to give away? And I was in Milwaukee, and I thought really hard about it. Right? And I didn't want to give it to anyone who asked me for it. I wanted to so I went to the library because there's usually, homeless people who hang out at the library, right? And I went to the library and I said, I have $50 to give away. Who do you think would be good? Anyway, and I wrote about it, and people started giving me $50 and mailing me $50 or $100 to give away to somebody.
Wow.
And so I do it, and I say to them, I'll write you who I give it to.
Okay.
So it's kind of great. So people write me, they give me money, I give it away. But see, if I were to tell you, I just gave $50 to a mentally ill person on my way here today.
Yeah.
You'd think, shut up, asshole.
Okay.
It just, because you can't talk about being charitable because it just makes you look like an asshole. But if it's somebody else's money,
Right.
you can talk about it all day.
All right. Well,
So
I'm gonna get you some cash. And I'm gonna ask you to give it to people.
And I'm really responsible with it. I think long and hard about who
smart.
I give it to.
This is the most extraordinary answer we've ever had to this question.
But they don't come back and ask you for money.
I understand. As someone this past year we've given to 42 different organizations.
Oh, no.
And so my except one per episode. So my mailbox is stacked with stuff.
But why do they do that? Why can't they just say?
I don't know. I think that's the model of the whole thing. They need the money, and so their only plan is to ask again and again and again. They know that you want to contribute,
And sometimes you don't want to give it again because you don't want them to think that their strategy is working. Mm-hmm. And I think they're out of touch. They're out of touch that they think that you want to hear from them again and again. You don't.
David. This is what makes you so brilliant. And also, I'm going to give you cash so you can give to strangers.
Okay, I'll give it away.
Okay.
I'll tell you who I give it to.
David, you're an inspiration. You're always surprising, always funny. And whenever I'm trying to figure out, trying to find a laugh when I can't find a laugh, I read your books. So thank you.
Oh, gosh, thank you, Mike.